So the last video I did, I talked about why we might be reluctant to receive from others in the form of assistance, support, charity, and the like. But today I want to focus on why we may find it challenging to accept the love of another person. And I'm not going to go into any great detail on this. I'm going to keep it brief because this is something that I've touched upon in a number of other videos already, but I did want to speak more specifically on this particular issue because there are so many of us who find this extremely challenging. And I'm also not going to beat around the bush either. I'm just going to lay it out there that the reason why we tend to have so much difficulty accepting love is usually because we don't feel worthy of being loved. After all, how can we accept something from someone if we don't feel that we truly deserve it? And ultimately, this comes down to a lack of self-love. So even if someone expresses love for us, even if it's very genuine and authentic, we don't tend to fully accept it. We may even be suspicious of it. How can they love me? I don't even love me. So really, this comes down to recognizing our own intrinsic value, recognizing that we are worthy of love and learning to love ourselves. And we are all immensely valuable. We are all worthy of love. But it's not enough for me to tell you this or for you to hear it from anyone else. You have to realize this for yourself. Because again, it doesn't matter what anyone else says or thinks if you don't believe it yourself. And I've noticed that when we don't love ourselves truly and deeply, we're always looking for reassurance and validation from someone else. We need to be constantly reminded, reaffirmed that we are lovable. And we'll always need that reassurance so long as we don't truly believe it ourselves. And really, it's not even about believing that you're worthy of love. It's about removing the false belief that says that you aren't worthy of being loved. Because to truly love yourself is not based on belief, it's based on knowing. It's based on the recognition that you are immensely valuable and that love is the very essence of who you are. But you can't just flip a switch and go from feeling unworthy to all of a sudden loving yourself. First, we really need to understand why we've come to believe that we aren't worthy of love in the first place. We need to understand how it is that we've come to hold this belief that we are intrinsically unworthy, that we aren't good enough, that we're somehow lacking in value, or that we're ultimately unlovable. And this is usually tied to our childhood, to the relationship that we had with our parents. Because as children, we are dependent upon our parents, and we have a tendency to interpret our value based on how our parents treat us. And so if a parent is not very loving, or is cold, or neglectful, or ill-tempered, or what have you, we interpret that as a reflection of our own value. And we may interpret that to suggest that we are not very lovable. But what we need to recognize now that we're adults is that our parents were imperfect, fallible human beings, just like everyone else. And that means that they were prone to making mistakes. They were prone to misjudgment. They were prone to stress and frustration and all sorts of erratic psychological and behavioral tendencies. They had their own problems. They may have been emotionally immature. They may have struggled with anxiety or depression or any number of other issues. And they may have had no idea at all how to raise a child. And so whatever way they may have treated us that was lacking in love or compassion or affection really had nothing to do with us and was really about their own inadequacies and personal issues. As children, we don't yet understand this. We tend to imagine that our parents know exactly what they're doing and that parenting is something that just comes naturally to them. So we assume that it's the nature of parents to love and protect and support and encourage their children. We imagine that they are mentally sound and emotionally mature and are fully capable of loving and caring for us. which means that if they behave toward us in a way that is unloving, we assume that it must be our own fault, our own inadequacy, our own unlovability. We don't consider that our parents are not just parents, they're also people, human beings, with all the typical human flaws and frustrations and so on. We don't consider that perhaps our parents may have been incapable of truly loving anyone, including themselves. And such a person would be incapable of loving even the most lovable child. But as adults, we can understand all of this. And we really need to recognize that the only real mistake that we made as a child was to misinterpret our parents' words and behaviors by assuming that it was any indication of our worth. And even that mistake is very innocent because, after all, we didn't know any better at the time. But we do know better now, and it's time that we shift our perspective. It's time that we let go of that false belief, that misinterpretation of our childhood situation. It's time that we realize that the way our parents may have treated us was really no indication at all of whether we were valuable or lovable or worthy. It's time that we begin to see for ourselves that we are valuable, that we are good enough, that we are worthy and lovable just as we are. And you don't have to be perfect to be any of these things. No one's perfect. But we can accept ourselves even with all of our various imperfections. And we can love ourselves in spite of anyone who doesn't. And as we begin to love ourselves, we naturally begin to welcome the love of others. If you find this content valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.